The first time my name was removed from the company, I was still working there. My access card stopped working at 9:17 a.m. By 9:18, my email was locked. By 9:21, my business partner was presenting my idea to investors using slides I built, numbers I verified, and a vision I never signed away. I didn't shout. I didn't walk into the boardroom. I didn't beg. I sat in my car, opened my laptop, and watched them celebrate a company I built that legally no longer belonged to me. They thought I was finished. They were wrong. I wasn't born into money. No connections. No safety net. I learned business the slow way. By failing first. My name is Ethan Cole. For 12 years, I worked in logistics and procurement, mostly back-end roles, the kind no one notices unless something breaks. I understood systems, warehouses, supply chains, margins. While others chased titles, I watched where money leaked. That's how the idea started, not as a startup. Not as a dream. As a fix. I noticed small manufacturers losing contracts because they couldn't scale distribution fast enough. Big retailers didn't want 10 vendors. They wanted one platform. So I built a model. Not an app at first, just spreadsheets, workflows, vendor agreements, a centralized distribution network for mid-sized manufacturers that I tested it quietly. Point one client turned into three. 3 into 9. Margins were thin but consistent. That's when I met Ryan Holt. Ryan was everything I wasn't. Polished, confident, good in rooms with investors. He said all the right words. Growth mindset, strategic expansion, exit planning. He saw my numbers and said, "This is big, but you can't scale it alone." He was right. Or so I thought. We formed Northway Distribution Group. I handled operations, systems, vendor contracts, compliance. Ryan handled sales, pitch decks, investor meetings. We split ownership 50-50. On paper, the first year was chaos. Long nights, constant pressure. I worked weekends. Ryan worked rooms. Revenue crossed 7 figures in month 10. That's when things changed. Ryan hired people without telling me. Marketing agencies, consultants. He said, "We need to look bigger." Then came the board. Point two investors, both introduced by Ryan. They asked sharp questions, mostly to me. Ryan sat back and nodded. IT first. I thought we were aligned. I was wrong. Slowly, decisions started happening without me. Bank changes, legal updates, revised operating agreements sent for review. I trusted him. That was my mistake. Point one clause mattered. I didn't see it. Not until the morning my access card failed. What Ryan didn't understand was that Northway didn't run on presentations. IT ran on systems only I controlled, and I never turned them over completely. Not out of fear. Out of habit. That habit saved me, because while they were celebrating their clean takeover, they had no idea how exposed they really were. And they had no idea I had already started documenting everything. Betrayal doesn't start with shouting or threats. It starts with meetings you're not invited to. The first sign wasn't dramatic. It was a calendar notification that disappeared. Every Monday at 10 a.m., Ryan and I reviewed operations. One week, the invite vanished. When I asked him, he laughed it off. Board prep ran long. Nothing major. I accepted it. That's how betrayal works. It feeds on your benefit of the doubt. Then came the emails CC'd after decisions were already made. New vendor terms, adjusted pricing models, revised expansion timelines, always phrased the same way, just looping you in. Already aligned with the board. We'll discuss later. Later never came. At the same time, Ryan started positioning himself differently in public. Investor calls became his vision. Panels became his story. Press releases mentioned him first. That I was described as technical support. That word stayed with me. Technical support. I built the engine. I designed the supply chain logic. I negotiated contracts that locked manufacturers into our platform. But suddenly, I was background. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I watched. I noticed how investor questions shifted. Less about operations. More about scalability risks. Risks I was never asked to explain. Point one afternoon, I reviewed our cap table. Something fell off. The percentages were the same. But the control wasn't that a new class of shares had been issued. Non-voting for investors. Enhanced voting rights for founders. Plural, except only one founder had those rights. Ryan.I pulled the operating agreement. The updated version .my name was still there. My equity was still there, but my authority had been quietly reduced. Board approval thresholds changed. Operational oversight redefined. Emergency powers assigned. I called our attorney. He paused longer than I liked. Ethan, when did you sign this addendum? I didn't. That silence on the line told me everything. Ryan hadn't forged my signature. He didn't need to. He timed the amendment during a funding bridge when I was traveling. Used an electronic consent clause buried in an earlier agreement. Triggered by majority shareholder approval. It was legal. That's the part no one tells you. Most betrayals are legal. By the time I understood the full picture, the board already viewed me as replaceable risk. Not malicious, not incompetent, just unnecessary. Then came the restructuring proposal, operational efficiency review. Ryan called my role would be streamlined. I would keep my equity, lose my authority, report to a COO he was hiring. A COO loyal to him. I asked a simple question. What happens if I say no? Ryan smiled. The kind of smile you give when you already know the answer. We moved forward anyway. That night, I didn't sleep, not because I was scared, because I was angry in a very controlled way. I opened my laptop and started pulling logs, system access histories, contract dependencies, vendor clauses tied specifically to my sign-off authority. Things Ryan never bothered to understand because he thought ownership was the same as control. It isn't. Northway ran on relationships. And most of those relationships weren't documented properly. They were personal. Mine. I called 3 manufacturers the next day. Not to warn them, not to threaten, just to check in. Each conversation revealed the same thing. Ryan had been promising changes. New pricing, new timelines, things he didn't have operational approval to guarantee. He was selling a future that didn't exist yet. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about pushing me out. This was about building a story that needed me gone. And the moment I stepped aside, the system would start failing. Not immediately, but predictably. I stopped reacting. I stopped attending meetings altogether. I became invisible on purpose. While Ryan celebrated control, I prepared leverage. I documented everything. Every overreach, every misrepresentation. I registered a new LLC. Quietly. No announcements, just structure. Because if Ryan thought this was the end of me, he didn't understand the one thing I'd learned in 12 years of logistics. When a system collapses, the one who knows how it actually works decides who survives. When people think revenge, they imagine confrontation. Raised voices. Public scenes. That's not how real power moves. Real power waits until the other side overextends. Ryan thought I was done because I stopped showing up. He mistook silence for surrender. What I was actually doing was mapping dependencies. Northway didn't just move products. It synchronized manufacturers, regional warehouses, last-mile carriers, and compliance reporting. On paper, Ryan owned the company. In reality, I owned the flow. Every vendor contract had an escape clause. Not termination. Renegotiation triggers. Missed benchmarks, altered pricing promises, timeline deviations. Ryan had violated 3 of them in under 60 days. I didn't alert legal. I didn't notify the board. I contacted vendors directly, not with accusations, with concern. I just want to confirm expectations. I'm seeing changes that weren't approved operationally. I don't want you exposed. That word mattered. Exposed. Suppliers hate uncertainty more than low margins. Within a week, renegotiation notices began arriving, not lawsuits. Requests, clarifications, amendments. Ryan brushed them off at first. Then shipping slowed, not dramatically. Just enough. Missed windows. Backlog docs. Inventory sitting idle. Metrics slipped by half a percentage point. Enough for investors to ask questions. Not enough for panic. Meanwhile, my new LLC came online. Quiet name. No connection to Northway.it, didn't compete. .it consulted. Specifically, it offered independent operational continuity assessments. 3 board members contacted me privately. Off the record, they weren't worried about loyalty. They were worried about risk. I didn't criticize Ryan. I explained systems. How trust-based logistics collapse when assumptions replace approvals. How vendor confidence evaporates before spreadsheets show damage. I showed them forecasts, not opinions. Outcomes. Then Ryan made his biggest mistake, that he accelerated a funding round, promised aggressive expansion, committed to numbers he couldn't deliver. I knew because I'd built the capacity models. Those numbers required my old approval paths, which no longer existed. The night before the investor presentation, I received an email from Ryan, short, "Careful, let's talk." I didn't respond. The next morning, I watched the live stream. Ryan was confident, smooth, until the Q&A. A fund manager asked about supplier guarantees. Ryan answered with generalities. Then another asked about recent contract amendments. He hesitated. The third question broke him. Why do 3 of your primary manufacturers have renegotiation triggers active right now? Ryan looked off screen. Someone was feeding him information too late. The stock dipped. Not a crash. A warning. That afternoon, the board convened an emergency session. This time, I was invited. I didn't speak much. I didn't accuse. I explained cause and effect. I explained that control without understanding creates fragility. That optics don't move freight. That authority doesn't replace trust, Ryan argued. Hard. He called me emotional. Defensive. He said I was sabotaging the company. I waited. Then I placed one document on the table. A vendor consortium letter, signed by 5 manufacturers. They weren't leaving. They were waiting. Waiting for operational clarity. Waiting for leadership alignment. Waiting to see if the system would stabilize or fracture completely. The room went quiet because everyone understood the same thing at once. Northway didn't need a visionary right now. It needed a mechanic, and the mechanic was sitting in front of them. Ryan looked at me like I'd betrayed him. That irony didn't escape me. I didn't enjoy this moment. I ended it. I don't want his job, I said. I want my role restored. Operational authority. Clear boundaries. The board didn't vote immediately. They didn't have to. Ryan's power evaporated without a decision. By the end of the week, the COO resigned. 2 board members withdrew support. Investors requested revised guidance. Ryan still owned shares, but ownership without confidence is just paper. That Friday evening, I got a message, not from Ryan, from his attorney. They wanted to discuss separation terms. I closed my laptop because the counter move was complete and the collapse was about to become visible. The board meeting happened on a Tuesday, and no announcement. No press. No leaks. Just calendar invites marked mandatory. Ryan arrived early. I arrived on time. That difference mattered more than either of us admitted. The chair didn't waste words. Investor confidence had dropped. Vendor guarantees were paused. Forecast credibility was compromised. Those were the facts. Then they asked Ryan to explain that he spoke for 20 minutes about vision, about growth, about speed. That he avoided numbers. When he finished, the room didn't react. Then they asked me one question. How long to stabilize? I didn't say immediately. I didn't say easily. I said realistically. 90 days to restore vendor trust. 6 months to normalize flow. 12 to exceed previous performance. No promises. No exaggeration. Just timelines. The chair nodded. That was the meeting. Ryan wasn't fired that day. That would have been dramatic. He was contained. His authority was limited to external relations. All operational decisions moved under an interim committee, which I led. Ryan still came to the office, but people stopped copying him on emails, stopped waiting for his approval, stopped asking his opinion. That kind of silence breaks faster than anger. 2 weeks later, a second investor withdrew, not loudly, quietly, cited leadership inconsistency. That phrase shows up right before exits. Ryan tried to fight it. He scheduled meetings, sent memos, pushed urgency. But urgency doesn't fix trust. Processes do. Vendors resumed shipments under revised terms. Warehouses cleared backlog that KPIs recovered slowly but visibly. Numbers don't care who signs the checks. They care who understands the system. A month later, Ryan's attorney called again. This time, there were terms: buyout, non-disparagement, no operational involvement. That he wanted out before the story reached the market. The board agreed. Ryan resigned on a Friday afternoon. The internal email was short, effective immediately. No farewell speech. No goodbye tour. By Monday, his office was empty. No one asked where he went, because systems don't miss people. They miss functions, and his function had already been replaced. 3 months later, I was offered the COO role permanently. I declined. I didn't want the title. I wanted control over what I built. So we negotiated. Clear authority. Defined boundaries. Board oversight. No silent partners. They agreed. Northway stabilized, then grew. Not fast. Correctly. A year later, Ryan launched a new startup. Different industry. Same language. Vision. Disruption. I didn't follow it. I didn't need to. Because betrayal teaches one thing clearly. Power doesn't belong to the loudest voice in the room. IT belongs to the person who understands what happens when the lights go out and trucks still need to move. I didn't win by fighting. I won by letting the system reveal the truth. And when it did, there was nowhere left for him to stand.